All right.
Let me know.
Go ahead.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Anna, for doing that tech support. Welcome to this webinar hosted by the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. The webinar's topic is From Palestine to the Pipeline. My name is Rama Kudemi, and I'm the Director of Grassroots Organizing at the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. Tonight we are very honored to discuss the resistance in Dakota Access Pipeline that has been taking place and acknowledge the win that just happened as the Army Corps of Engineers halted and by denying the final permits for the pipeline's route. The proposed route of the pipeline runs through an area of Siouxland that is of utmost cultural, spiritual, and environmental significance. There are historic Hill, Carounds, village grounds, and Sundance sites that would be directly impacted. The pipeline is also supposed to run under the Missouri River, whose water is essential to life on the Standing Rock Reservation. This is an opportunity to discuss the links between indigenous rights struggles globally, something particularly important for those of us who are working to end all U.S. support for Israeli settler colonialism that continues to steal the land and resources of the indigenous Palestinian population. And we're making sure that we recognize the settler colonial nature of the United States itself and challenge the continuing denial of the rights of Native nations and their people as well. Our speakers tonight will help us understand the struggle against the pipeline within the larger context of the movement for indigenous rights, give us a report back from Standing Rock, and help us think about what it means for activists involved in organizing for Palestinian rights to show up for indigenous rights work here in the U.S. Our first speaker is Crystal Tubos, who is Oglala Lakota and Northern Cheyenne. She's the director of Voices of the Sacred, which focuses on the healing, empowerment, and leadership development of Native youth and young adults by sharing community organizing and nonviolent direct action skills with them to uphold the rights of Mother Earth, indigenous peoples, and humanity. She is currently overseeing the Global Solidarity Campaign that supports the No DAPO movement out of Standing Rock. Crystal will be followed by Megan Awad and Nadia Tanis, who are with the Palestinian Youth Movement, a transnational independent grassroots movement of young Palestinians in Palestine and exile. For the past few weeks, PYM has organized a caravan of Palestinian, Arab, and Solidarity activists to Standing Rock to support efforts to stop the pipeline. Thank you so much for all of you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Crystal.
Okay, thank you. I have to apologize. I kind of have a little cold, and I've been traveling for a while now, so I apologize if I'm kind of like coming in and out. So let me know if I need to speak up or anything. But so I was just looking over some of the questions that were sent to me, and so I guess basically to start off with, I'll just do like a brief update from camp. Some other folks might have more information because I'm not at camp right now. I've been doing a lot of traveling, especially with the campaign and trying to gain support and also support other movements at the same time and uplift their struggles with the attention that we've been able to get at Standing Rock. And so that's kind of what I've been doing. I'm not at Standing Rock, so I'm sure there's other folks that will have more up-to-date calls to action, up-to-date just updates in general from camp. But basically, from what I'm hearing and what I was updated on today was that, yes, the tribal chairman, he's concerned about the safety and the well-being of folks at camp for the simple fact of the weather. Weather conditions are pretty bad there right now in Standing Rock. From what I was told, that the blizzard's still going on. A lot of folks have left so far. They've been evacuating people out to the casino into different spaces within the community that are safer and more sturdy. But there are a lot of folks still camping there, and they don't plan to go anywhere. And so we have a little bit of a mixture on thoughts about what's next. I know everyone heard about the Army Corps of Engineers announcement that they will not approve or that they did not grant the easement. And so I think it's important to recognize that the language there, they didn't deny it. They just did not approve it. And that's different. They didn't make an official stance. They called for an environmental impact statement, but they didn't outright deny it. And so that means the door is still open for the permit to go through. And from my understanding, if there's an appeal process, they can appeal. And that means that once the Trump administration takes office, that they will be the ones overseeing the appeal. And in that case, Trump's already expressed his support of opening up the doors for jobs through pipeline, through the oil and gas industry, basically. And so that's a big concern that we're still thinking through right now. And that's kind of where folks are on the ground, as far as like the organizers, people who are actually there, those of us that are calling to action for folks to go to camp and for people to take action against the banks, against the different targets that we've done research around. Basically right now we're kind of in a place of stepping back and looking at the situation we're in, and then we're reevaluating and reassessing so we can make the best possible decision moving forward in this movement right now. And I don't have a whole lot of answers for folks right now, except for the fact that Dave did call for people to leave camp. There are a lot of people that are deciding to stay. A lot of organizations, a lot of groups of people, a lot of the camps are staying. And so that's out there. We're still actively asking people to continue to target the banks, because in the best scenario right now is that the DAPL, or Dakota Access Pipeline, will not drill under the river. And the best case scenario is that they will stop and they will halt construction until the EIS is done. And so that's our hopes right now. And in that case, though, we're still continuing forward with the movement and with calling people to take action around the banks, because that's just, the permit is, it's just one front that we were fighting on, and we're continuing to fight the banks. We're continuing to ask the different corporations and the companies that have contracts with DAPL to cancel their contracts with them. There's a lot of contracts that were created under the stipulations that they would be operational by January 1st. And because that's not going to be the case, we're hoping that we can put enough pressure on them to have them cancel those contracts. And to not only, through the permit process and the administrative process, not only win on that front, but also defund the Dakota Access Pipeline. And so that's why it's so strong right now to continue to focus and to put a lot of our energies and our efforts into these banks, so that way they don't release the second installment of the loans. As of right now, only the first installment was released, and that was also under the stipulations that they be to a certain percentage done by a certain date, and that also is not being met. And so because of that, we have some really big opportunities right now, and we want to be able to make the best possible decisions moving forward, and how we continue to use this momentum and the support that we've been able to gain in the best way possible and the most effective way possible. Also right now, this call is really timely, because I think a lot of people are having the conversations of, okay, once the black snake is dead, and I do have full hopes that it will be, that what do we do with all of this after that? Where does all of this energy go? And so part of our goal with the Global Solidarity Campaign is to continue directing folks who want to take action to all of the other struggles that are going on across not only this country but the world. And so I think that's really important to remember. I know, just like referring, if you give me a second, refer back to these questions, how this fight fits in within the larger movement for Indigenous rights. I think that's significant because we just last week we had more in-depth conversations around shifting the conversation around solely protecting the water, which is what brought us there in the first place, is our belief in the life that water gives. That's what called us there. And then from that point, we wanted to engage in deeper conversation around sovereignty and around treaty rights and around even the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. And so we were starting to shift our messaging and our narrative to expand, and to be more inclusive of the fights of Indigenous folks around the world. And I think right now, with where people are, we want to start having those conversations more. We want to keep that attention focused on the fact that we have treaty rights there, that the 1868 and 1851 Fort Laramie treaties exist, and that land that they're on was never ceded. It was never, yeah, it was just never ceded. So they're on unceded land right now, where the camp is located and where they're trying to drill. And so we wanted to raise the attention and the awareness around all of that, and really expand the narrative. And that's the larger context, is the colonization and how that even led to the treaties and how that impacted us as a people and still does, and how, even the environmental racism that we're seeing, it's all tied into the initial colonization of our people and of this country. And so that was a big conversation. For me, some of the most inspiring things with this campaign has been around all of the support that we've been able to gather from folks and from some populations that we didn't think we would really gather a lot of support. For example, the police officers. We got actually numerous letters and messages through our No DAPL Solidarity website and through our No Dakota Access Pipeline Global Solidarity Campaign Facebook page. We had multiple messages from different police officers that had written us and given us advice as far as taking note of the different sheriff's departments' badges and numbers and names to maintain them for lawsuits in the future. So we had a lot of folks giving us advice on what to do. We had one young man message us, and he was actually there in North Dakota on the ground with the sheriff's department from out of state. He messaged us and said that he didn't want to be there, and that he was apologizing basically for his actions and what he was ordered to do. And so we got a lot of support from these groups that we didn't think we would get support from. And so to me, that was the most inspiring and really humbling to see people come out in the thousands, and to see actions happen across the country, everywhere, targeting banks because we asked for help, and we asked for support, and people showed up and people did the work. And so that was really inspiring to me. Some of the other things that were inspiring to me were the fact that our movement was able to stay in prayer and to stay grounded in prayer. I personally remember the first day that I got to camp back in August. We drove all night from Salt Lake City from another gathering that we were at, and we drove and we got there around probably like 5 in the morning, just in time to show up for the sunrise ceremony that they had at the first illegal entryway. And so we showed up there, and that's what they did, is they had prayer immediately right when the sun came up. And I'll remember that moment forever. And that prayer that was started way back when the original camp was started in April was maintained all the way through and is still being maintained now. And to me, that's really inspiring, and I think that's what gives us the advantage. That's what gives us a uniqueness in this movement, is the fact that we have prayer, we have ceremony, and we have our ways of being in connection to this land. And we still have that, and we still maintain that, and we still carry that with us every day. And that's what, what I believe got us this far, and what brought us to this point right now. And so I think that's really inspiring to me. And I think it really is something that will have an impact on all of my organizing in the future, and what my organizing will be based in as well, and where we'll start from. And I think some of the biggest lessons that I learned through this whole process, and just lessons that I was asked to kind of share on this webinar as well, was around controlling the narrative. as everybody knows, when you're organizing campaigns and you're doing the work, you don't always agree with everybody you're organizing with all the time. And that's fine. That's a natural process. But I think as long as you control the narrative and you control the messaging that's going out there, um, it reflects better on your campaign, is that you show that solid front. And despite, disagreements that are going to get worked out regardless, that you're able to put that narrative out there and not allow whoever the oppressor is or whoever you're organizing against to use that as a divisive tactic to divide and conquer. And so I think that's really important. Probably one of the bigger lessons I've learned. Also, relationship building. Um, the only reason we've been able to grow this big in the way I've been able to even do the work that I do is because of relationships that I have established and that I've built with people over the years, and that I've nurtured and cared for, and those people that I've supported over the years and showed up for were able to show up whenever I called on them. And so I think relationship building is really important. And, with the Trump administration coming in, now more than ever, we're going to need those relationships. We're going to need the solidarity, and we're going to need a lot more cross-movement strategy to support each other, not only on, nationally here dealing with Trump, but on a global level, dealing with the corporations and dealing with the banks. And so I think relationship building is also something I think is really important. And I think the other piece of advice, or a few other pieces of advice I have, are one of my friends she works within another, larger green NGO, but she had told me that people want to help, but they're not being asked, and they're not being told what they can do to help or to support. And so for me, that was a big lesson, is that when we organize, we often just expect people to just kind of like fall in and to just support and just do things. But we rarely take the time to step back and to really think about what it is we're actually asking people to do. How do we want people to show up? In what way do we want them to show up? What is it that we're trying to get at? And I think those are really important questions that anybody organizing has to ask, is, what do we want from folks that want to support us? And it feels a little contradictory, or it feels a little forward, at least for me. But I've recognized over these last few months how important that is, to have specific things that we can ask of people, because it gets rid of the confusion, and it also prevents missteps from happening, and it prevents well-intentioned actions that don't go the way that we want them to go. It prevents that from happening as well when we have specific and clear asks of people. So that's something else I would also recommend. Let me see. So I think also what I've noticed as far as media goes, and as far as asking people what it is that we want them to support us on, is having one location, or a specific location, to have your messaging go out on, or at least just a few sites that people can trust and go to for this information, for updates. I know with this campaign, it's been overwhelming with how many GoFundMe sites popped up, how many different websites came up to support, and it's all very appreciated, but oftentimes I know it gets confusing and people get lost in that. And so making sure that the organizers, whoever they may be, have specific sites to centralize all of the messaging and the call to actions and the campaign updates is really important. The last thing I would share around organizing and lessons that I've learned organizing with folks at Standing Rock is that not one person represents everybody. And I think as Native folks, I think that's often frustrating for people who want to work with us, especially folks who don't have that same mindset, is that we don't just have one person that speaks for all of us. we have oftentimes multiple representatives that represent different groups or different families, or in this case at Standing Rock, that represent multiple camps of people that have been created around similar missions and similar tactics and approaches. And so it's important to remember that all of those different people represent us, not just that one person. And that's often really difficult to identify who those people are. But for folks wanting to work with Native communities, it's important to always just do your due diligence and seek out the different folks that have voices in this campaign or in whatever the respective campaign is. That's really important. Is like you can't go to one Native person or any one person from a campaign and expect that to be the end all. And so that's kind of the last thing that I've really, or those are the main things that I've learned through this process at Standing Rock. I think also, as far as folks wanting to continue to show up and what connects us and what connects this fight and makes it a global fight, is the very fact that when I started having conversation with people, we started recognizing that we were dealing with the same corporations and the same companies and the same banks. And for me, that's what the Global Solidarity Campaign is about. It's about really stepping back and looking at all of the reach, I guess, of the corporations. We found that, G4S, the security firm that we were dealing with, that's who other folks are dealing with as well. We have, relatives on Mauna Kea who dealt with the same security firm as us. The banks in Norway, the DNB Bank is now asking for conversations or to have conversations with Standing Rock Sioux Tribes tribal chairman Dave Archambault, and they're pulling out of their investment in the Dakota Access Pipeline. And that's in Norway, and the Sami people there have been organizing and supporting us and recognizing that they're dealing with the same thing. And so it's important to make those connections and to find common ground. And that's what makes this a global fight, is the fact that these corporations are not unique. This pipeline is not unique. This fight really isn't unique at all. And so it's recognizing that and seeing that there's the exact same struggles going on around the world, and all peoples connected to Mother Earth, connected to the land, connected to the water, are being impacted by these same corporations. Michael's Construction, I think they go by Michael's Corporation, but they're the construction firm that's actually building. They're international. So wherever the pipelines go and those corporations go, Michael's Construction goes and follows them, and they're the ones that build for them. And so it's literally the same people, just different locations and different names. And so I think moving forward, even continuing to support this campaign, but also moving forward and looking at how we do this on a global front, that's how you do it, is you find the common ground, and you establish your relationships, you find ways to support each other and to show up for each other, and you build that relationship. And I think that's kind of the main thing that, as far as the global campaign goes. Also, kind of lastly, just looking at the questions, is I was asked how folks can stay involved organizing, or folks that are organizing for Palestinian rights, and how can they show up for Indigenous rights work here in the U.S. And I think a lot of the things that I've already shared, but most especially I think the conversations around the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the treaty rights, and the rights of Mother Earth, I think those are all good avenues to continue to support, but also maintain your organizing around the issues and the struggles that you're dealing with as well. I think that's really important, and it's a way to be able to continue organizing around both movements and both campaigns. But also, we're going to be doing, I believe, a national call tomorrow, asking folks, just giving them a basic update from camp that right now, we're still trying to make that decision as to like what it is we're going to do and how we're going to update our call to actions. But one thing has stayed the same, and that's the fact that we're still asking people to take action against the banks. And we're going to focus on the corporations or the companies that have contracts with DAPL. And so as far as showing up specifically for this campaign, those are good ways right now to continue doing so. We're currently in an active December is a month of action. We've our organization, our Global Solidarity Campaign, in addition to multiple Indigenous-led organizations that are on the ground in Standing Rock, we formed a coalition. And so we're the ones responsible for putting out the call to actions and the specific things that we're asking of people who want to support us. And so we're basically we're in the middle of this month of action right now, and every Thursday we have a theme, and it's on our nodapplesolidarity.org site, and so folks can check it out there. But basically, we're going to continue to ask people to follow through on that month of action. We're planning for December 25th on Christmas Day, if folks just to have a day of prayer. And so we're planning that. Also on December 10th, we have Wells Fargo. We're going to completely focus on Wells Fargo for the entire day of December 10th. And so that's coming up where we're asking folks across the nation and globally if there's access to be able to take action against Wells Fargo, whether that's closing bank accounts, whether that's taking action like hosting an educational session, or whether it's hosting a rally or a lockdown, whatever that might be, we're asking folks to take action against Wells Fargo on December 10th. And so we want to encourage people to continue to look at our website. It's nodapplesolidarity.org. And so just encourage you to continue to look at that site and to look at our call to action, and to look at the themes that we have for every Thursday, and to continue organizing in your own communities. Continue sending support. Right now they're in a blizzard. I know a lot of tents were demolished is what I heard. A lot of folks' vehicles are stuck. So I know a lot of folks need hotel rooms right now. I know there are a lot of people that are staying at the hotel just in the hallways, and staying in the gyms, and staying in the different pavilion where they do concerts. And so if you're able to support folks that way, maybe call the casino, offer to pay for a room for someone for the night, or there's still supply lists out there. There's still ways to fund people. And so just continue to take action. This campaign and this movement's not going away, despite the Army Corps' decision. We're just reevaluating and seeing what is the best way to move forward. But for now, focusing on the banks and continuing with the December month of action is the best way to do that. So I think I'm able to answer some questions on the chat, so I think I'll do that. But just thank everybody for your time. I really appreciate taking your time out of this evening to listen a little bit to what I'm sharing, and I thank the organizers for this opportunity. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And folks, I put in the chat box the link to the nodapplesolidarity.org site. And like Crystal said, if you have other questions, definitely keep chatting them in, and one of us will answer them. But I wanted to turn it over now to Nadia and Megan to talk a little bit more about their experience being there at the camp as part of the Palestinian youth movement, and what they're seeing as kind of the connection and links across Indigenous struggles.
Hey everyone, it's Nadia. I think Megan is also on the line. Megan, can you hear us?
Hi everyone. You probably can't see me because I'm currently here at Standing Rock. I'm actually in the casino, so yeah. on my phone.
So the first PYM caravan to Standing Rock was in September, and it was specifically an initiative by the Palestinian Youth Movement, which Megan and I are both a part of, from the USA chapter. And the first caravan up of youth, mostly from California, so from the SoCal and the Bay Area chapters, was in September. And then the second caravan started November 19th, where Megan and I both went back to Standing Rock, and it is actually ongoing. And we have committed to being there until January 5th. And so I left around Thanksgiving after being there for about 10 days. And then Megan, as you can all tell, is still there, and we have more people coming up each day. And so a couple of new groups just left, and they're on their way to Standing Rock right now.
Yeah, so our first caravan, like Nadia was saying, was in September. It was a group of us from Southern California, and we just felt like as Indigenous people, it was really important to stand in solidarity because we know what it's like to have our land stolen, to face a genocide, and to consistently have our environment destroyed. So we took the 30-hour drive trip up to North Dakota, and I felt like after being here for a week the first time that it was necessary to come back.
Yeah, and I think it was really potent for all of us who went. You know, kind of as Megan said, it when we first went to Standing Rock, there's so much going on, but in September it was also very different at camp than it is now, and I'm sure Crystal can also speak to that and how things have changed. And so, but it became necessary, and we felt that it was very necessary for us to commit to come back, especially because, just to echo Megan, as we are Indigenous people, not of this land, but of another land that's also undergone settler colonialism and is currently, as we are currently resisting settler colonialism there, we too are settlers here, just by the mere fact that we ourselves are not Indigenous. Now, although most of the youth in the Palestinian youth movement, if not all of them, their families have come pretty recently, say, you know, from the 40s to the 70s or 80s to the United States. Therefore, our ancestors were not here, you know, 500 years ago, committing original acts of genocide. We still, as residents and citizens of the United States who are not of Indigenous blood, we are still profiting and benefiting off of the degradation of Indigenous peoples and the lack of Indigenous sovereignty, the lack of recognition of Indigenous sovereignty. I myself, for example, live in the Bay Area, which is Ohlone nations, particularly where I am, and the Ohlone are not a federally recognized tribe, although there are registers of them being here, and they are still here. And so I think something that Standing Rock really represents for so many of us who are Palestinian youth here is ourselves as Palestinians struggling against settler colonialism in Israel. But also it's a call for us to support that resistance here and that stand here. And just to reflect on what Crystal said earlier about, you know, Standing Rock was, people were called to Standing Rock to protect the water, which is a wonderful thing because that's something that all of us need and our future generations will also need. And it's a part of this earth and we should respect it, not corporatize it, not commodify it. However, I think we do need to transfer into deeper conversations around Indigenous sovereignty. Decolonization doesn't have a synonym, right? The equal to that is not social justice. The equal to that is not human rights. The equal to that is based on an Indigenous framework. Decolonization is based on Indigenous framework. And until we really have those conversations, moving forward, I don't think that we can really call ourselves to be in solidarity with Indigenous peoples here. I think we really need to commit to carrying that forward and following Indigenous leadership, and their asks, their requests moving forward, and using that energy. Megan, do you want to reflect?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if it cut out or if you had stopped. This phone service is kind of iffy. But yeah, I also wanted to add that I think another really important part is also understanding that we are settlers on someone else's land. And we may be settlers as refugees in diaspora, and we may not be able to return to our homeland, but it's really important to understand that we may be living on somebody else's land who may not have access to their land, and I think that's really crucial in understanding how to stand in solidarity. I think it's the first step.
Megan, did you want to talk about your comparison of the olive tree and the buffalo?
Yeah, yeah. So one of the comparisons I made in our report back in September was the comparison between the way that the buffalo and the olive trees are both targeted as ways of committing genocide both on the land and the people of the land. The buffalo was targeted, and one of the generals actually said, if you kill the buffalo, you kill the Indian. And in the same way, settlers in Palestine consistently burn our olive trees. And these acts of violence are, I think, reflection of the way that the people are treated as well, and the way that the land is consistently treated. But at the same time, I think both of these symbols are powerful symbols of resistance, because no matter how much they try and burn down our olive trees, we'll continue to plant them. And no matter how many buffaloes they will kill, buffaloes are continuing to grow. So like the way that I think these two really reflect the connection between our struggles. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's like, it's such a beautiful comparison and such an important one. And I think that there are other, we spoke earlier about feeling a really strong connection to what was going on in Standing Rock as Indigenous peoples. And I think just to break down those comparisons between what's happening here and what's happening in Palestine, there's, a lot of things. One is, as Megan was saying, just the basic occupation of the land, and preventing access of Indigenous peoples to their land, through lawfare, through physical occupation of it, etc. The other is water. So, as many of us know, in Palestine, clean water is becoming increasingly scarce. If there is, for example, 98% of an aquifer under Palestinian village land, and 2% of it falls under the wall or near a settlement, then actually it's the Israeli settlement, or it's the partition of the wall, so the Israeli government, who gets to take that water, not Palestinians. And water is very expansive, and it flows by nature. So to curtail water is just ridiculous. There's nothing that we as Palestinians can do about that law, or that practice, rather, that policy. Also, a comparison that I made is just seeing how dependent the camp at Standing Rock, so the multiple camps actually are, on the river. I mean, it's really, really crucial to life there. And in Palestine, it reminds me of the road to Jericho, from beside the settlement of Mali Adumim in the West Bank. As we were going on the road, there were all of these water wells, I mean, tons of them. And what basically we saw around them were all these Palestinian villages, and around these wells were electric fences. They were white, and they were literally constructed around a water well so that unless you had the key to turn off the electricity, you could not access the well. And so along with the continuing pollution of clean water, specifically in Gaza, for example, which makes whatever accessible water unpotable, I think just a certain lack of infrastructure and a certain lack of access to your own resource, I mean, that was extremely apparent at Standing Rock. And it's particularly apparent on many, many reservations in the United States. I think also of the Dene Reservation, the Navajo Reservation, that is increasingly having less and less clean water available because of the King Gold Mine spill in 2015 into the Animas River, which released arsenic and all these other compounds into a river where the local indigenous people really, really rely on that water every day for cooking, for bathing, and for all of their everyday actions. And the final connection I'll bring in is the violence. So I think I'll let Megan start off with a description of what happened November 20th on the Sunday on the bridge on Highway 1806. But basically the all-encompassing violence that so many water protectors have seen or have felt have been attacked with by a series of forces really, really reflects what is going on in Palestine. The tactics that they're using, the actual compounds or the materials being used, and just the overt aggression upon a unarmed, nonviolent group of people, indigenous people mostly, standing up for their basic rights on their land. That's it, Megan. Do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, so on November 20th, Nadia and I are actually on our way back from Bismarck, and we saw that on Facebook there had been an action started on the bridge, and so when we got there like at the very beginning because it went on all night. But this action was basically started because the police created a barricade on the bridge, and this bridge allows folks to get to Bismarck, which is the closest like major city, within half an hour. But because of the blockade, it actually makes the trip twice as long, and it takes you about an hour to get into Bismarck. And a lot of the local community was getting really upset that this barricade was there. So a lot of the water protectors decided to go up there and ask the police to remove the barricade. And they attempted to, the police had put razor wire fencing around, and they had placed 2 different trucks so that you really couldn't get to them or to the barricade. And so the water protectors were able to move one of the trucks, but as a result, the police escalated the violence dramatically, and they began to use sound grenades on people, and they used the water cannons. And that day, I believe it was in the 20s, temperature-wise, and they used pepper spray, tear gas. I was tear gassed a couple of times, and that stuff doesn't really leave your lungs. It stays in there for a few days. I actually threw up from it 2 days later. They shot rubber bullets at people. The water cannons, I think, were a really intense part of this. this violence because of how cold it was outside. I actually learned that day that hair freezes when it gets wet. I grew up in California, so I'm not familiar with this cold of weather, and my hair had hardened, and I was like, hey, what's wrong with my hair? Is there something else in this water? And then people were like, no, your hair's frozen. And that's when I realized that I should probably go back to camp and change into clothes that were dry. But it was cold, and the police claimed afterwards that they were only using the water to put out the fires. But it's clear if you've seen the videos that they were spraying people, and the fires were merely started to keep people warm who were getting sprayed with water. This action led to a lot of people going into hypothermia. One woman had I believe it was one of the sound grenades or one of the canisters that hit her arm, and I know that she was going through surgery. So it overall it reminded me very much of the violence that Palestinians face. And we weren't able to grab any of the canisters to actually look at where they're made, but I know for a fact that a lot of those types of weapons are tested on Palestinians and then sold to other countries. So it could be very possible that these same, like the tear gas could have been tested on Palestinians and then brought here and used.
And
yeah, go ahead, Nadia.
I think also the other thing is Megan mentioned the water cannons, which really shocked everybody who saw those videos, or a majority of people who saw those videos when they were nationalized, but and spread across the news. But you know, when the water hit the ground at that temperature, it froze automatically, and so now you're not only kind of trying to move around in a non-safe environment, but there's also black ice, and the water was very on the ground was very kind of oily, and so there's a very high probability, I think, that they have mixed mace into the water that were spraying people with the water cannon. And also, as Megan said, just the overt claim that we were vandalizing something by lighting fires was ridiculous, because the fires were nowhere near the police line, 1. 2, they were not burning property. And 3, it was necessary for many protectors who were facing hypothermia to stay warm on the lines. And Megan and I both saw people who went into hypothermia on the bridge and had to be taken away. And, you know, for the next couple of days, you could smell the tear gas in the camp. And there was a run on medic supplies. There were a lot of things that the medic tent ran out of, a lot of just surge of materials that were used. And so I think the other thing, just to mention, is the LRAD, which is a machine that makes this high-pitched kind of noise which gives you tinnitus, and it rings in your ears and disorients you. It was used by the U.S. forces during the invasion of Iraq, and there were actually, according to NPR, and did a report, you know, a couple days after the 20th, they said that there were actually private contractors who had served in Iraq who were there, and they were the ones who knew how to use the LRAD machine on the protectors.
Yeah, I think just going off what Nadia said, that the violence that the state is committing against, I think specifically the water cannons, I think are representation of genocide, and are actually genocide, because they knew very well that when using water cannons in those temperatures that people could go into hypothermia. They knew exactly what they were doing. It wasn't like it was 90 degrees out and they were spraying us with water. No, it was cold. The water on the ground was freezing. The water on people was freezing. And that to me is an act of trying to kill people. It's an act of genocide. So I think that the state's violence against Native people is very similar to the Zionist state's violence against Palestinians, in the way that there's a consistent attempt to try and eliminate any form of resistance or even the native to the land.
Yeah, and I think that in kind of contrary to that, what's been so inspiring about the No DAPL struggle is just the coalition of nations and of people, of orgs who have come together for a common goal in order to reach a common kind of a common outcome. And so I think that's really amazing. I mean, going into a Shati Shakawan and seeing the long row of flags from all of these different nations is really indicative to the fact that no matter how violent or how oppressive the state and its forces may be, or how little information gets out because of the media blackout or the attempt to squelch any sort of Wi-Fi or signal there, we are not alone, right? The people at Standing Rock are not alone. There are over 300 indigenous nations that stand by them. And I think that's really, really powerful because while overt violence is very forceful, it doesn't have power in the same way because it operates off of physical harm and emotional trauma, and that's fear. But when you feel that there are people standing in solidarity with you who really have your interest in mind, who really do trust you, who really will follow your leadership, who really will strive for the same common goal, I think that is the best medicine. And something that's really uniting at Standing Rock, and something that begins most actions and ends most actions, is prayer, which Crystal talked about earlier. And I think this is part of decolonization as well. It's staying rooted to your ways of knowledge and staying rooted and true to your culture. And in that way, in the face of genocide, when there is an attempt to dislocate yourself from your culture, from your history as an indigenous person, it's that stance of no, I will know myself and I will empower myself and I will pass that knowledge on to my people so that we can remain, we are still here. So I think in the face of all of these things, that's been really powerful and impactful. And just to add as well that there has been a win in many ways through the halting of construction. However, I think we should be really, really aware not to take our eyes off of Standing Rock, not to let it de-escalate in terms of sending support, because I think, or I feel, and many people know, that there is a very real threat of construction continuing either under Obama or under the next presidency.
Yeah, I agree. And DAPL also released a statement that regardless of this decision, that they still have full intention of continuing to build the pipeline and just pay the fine. So DAPL has full intention of continuing this. And I believe that, yeah, it's not over.
And I think as we kind of end this, I want to leave time for questions. We want to be able to answer your questions. But I also pasted in the Palestinian Youth Movement Caravan sign-up sheet and information sheet for those who are interested in learning more.
Thank you so much, Ned and Megan. And I'm repasting the sign-up sheet, so everyone should have it in their chat box now, where that's your opportunity to sign up for the caravan and learn more about what PYM is doing while they're. If folks have questions, you can. I know folks have been chatting in, so that's great. You can continue to chat in questions. Also, if you want, if you raise your hand, we can unmute you to ask a question too. So I'm going to give folks a chance. And I know Crystal, I see Crystal has been answering some of the questions, which is wonderful. But yeah, I'm just waiting to see if there's any questions that come in. Okay, I see Patricia R has her hand raised, so I'm going to unmute you, Patricia, and you can go ahead and ask your question. Patricia, you're unmuted. You want to ask? Can you hear me, Patricia? Okay, I'm not sure, Patricia.
Hello.
Yes. Hi, Patricia. Do you want to ask?
Hi. Yes. Hi. Sorry about that. I thought that I could just type down my question. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. First of all, thank you. And the other thing that I just, wanted to know is about your view about the rest of the native population in the continent. And I'm not talking about, for me, the Americas, it's all the same, North America and South America, they're all together. So what is your view about the rest of the struggles, particularly in South America? Because I'm from Uruguay, and we have been seeing a lot of struggles about natural resources, and not just from this time, but since the 80s and the coups that were supported by the CIA. So what do you think about that? Your views about the native population from the rest of the continent. Thank you.
Hey, this
Thank
is
you, Patricia.
Crystal.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, just a second, let me look at this again. So I really think that a lot of our relatives to the south, and a lot of our relatives that have been living under oppressive regimes and in this struggle longer than we have at this time, as far as it goes with natural resources, I think we have a lot to learn. I actively am engaging in conversation with multiple nations and tribes from different areas in like Mexico and Central South America to have those conversations. Okay, like what does a large global campaign and movement look like, where we recognize each other and we acknowledge that we are fighting the same fights. Some people with more experience in it than others, and right now I really feel like with what's going on at Standing Rock, all of the attention we've been able to gather and the support we've been able to bring, I think that part of the responsibility is not only to continue supporting Standing Rock, but it's also for those of us that are organizing and from those communities to uplift other struggles with the attention that we've been able to gather. And I mentioned earlier I've been traveling. That's why I've been traveling so much, is so that way I can continue to have those conversations and to learn from folks who have more experience than I do, and to find those common grounds. Like I mentioned earlier, we have to find the common ground. In a world that tries so hard to divide all of us and to focus on what is different and identify what's different from them and eliminate it, it's so important to identify what we share in common. And unfortunately, a lot of times that's the struggle. That's these corporations. We literally are sharing corporations now. I'm imagining that the owners of Dakota Access Pipeline have ownership in other pipelines and other oil and gas industry projects that are in Mexico, that are in South America, that are in other parts of the world. And so I really think that if we really want to look at what decolonization means, and we really want to dismantle these systems that continue to oppress anybody that has a relationship to Mother Earth and anybody that has a relationship to the land, then then we need to look at it on a global level. We need to be able to hit all fronts. We need to be able to accept a diversity of tactics. And most importantly, like, we need to build those relationships with each other. There's no way we would be doing what we're doing at Standing Rock if we didn't establish those relationships. If folks who wanted to support didn't come there and build relationships with people. And we need that now more than ever. But I think we have a lot of learning still to do. We have a lot of growing to do. But amidst all of that, I'm really hopeful. And I look forward to having conversations with our relatives from all over the world. And so that's my take on it. I think that we're all in this same fight together, and we need to start recognizing each other and treating each other as such. Thanks.
Thank you, Crystal. Looking through, I see there's another question from Claire, so I'm going to unmute you, Claire.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I'm from Kalispell, Montana, and my understanding is that most Native Americans see a definite parallel with the Palestinian struggle. And now I'm just going to read what I wrote. I contacted Palestinian Youth Movement after learning that the Crow Nation, neighbors, I think, of Crystal's Northern Cheyenne, is that correct? Anyway, I understood that the Crow Nation is in full support of Israel and even fly a big Israeli flag over their Veterans Park. And knowing that the Crow Nation was going to send representatives to Standing Rock, I tried to encourage Palestinian Youth Movement to meet with them, possibly giving the Crow people another perspective on the Palestinian struggle. And I'm wondering if there was any contact with the two groups.
We did try to find them, but when we got there, they had already left.
Okay.
So we were unable to reach out to them. But yeah, I did look into that too, and I read the same things. And yeah, I mean, for the most part, Native folks here get really super excited when they find out I'm Palestinian. Our kofi, our resistance scarf, is worn everywhere here. There are multiple places at camp where the Palestinian flag is flown. So for the majority of my experience here, there's been nothing but support and love and solidarity between Palestinian and Native folks. But yeah, I've heard that about Crow Nation as well, and hopefully one day we can reach out to them.
Thank you so much. So we're at the end. So I wanted to thank again Crystal, Nadia, and Megan for taking the time. We're really honored that you all joined us tonight to share your experiences, to share your lessons about doing this kind of organizing and what it would mean to, take the resistance happening to the Dakota Access Pipeline and put it in the context for the larger movement for Indigenous rights. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And if you want more information about the U.S. campaign, please do visit our website, uscpr.org. And I guess the two websites, I'm going to put them one more time in the chat. The first link is going to be for the PYM caravan. Let me just send it to the entire audience. And then the second link is from the website that Crystal was saying, Solidarity, NoDAPASolidarity.org, where that's kind of the hub to learn more about the resistance to the oil pipeline and and the continued resistance, as everyone has mentioned, that even though there was a very significant win that we should definitely pause and celebrate, there's still a very large chance that they continue with the drilling, that they're continuing with the drilling anyway, and making sure that our work continues beyond just this pipeline, but for Indigenous struggle in general. So thank you everyone so much for joining us tonight, and have a great rest of your evening.